Welcome to the Dynamics of Everyday Life, where we demystify some tricky concepts and get to know ourselves a little bit better. Welcome back to the show, everyone. As I build my psychodynamic training empire, I'm always one to think big, I have to do the things that one day I hope I'll have a department that will do them for me. Marketing, sales, IT, etc. All the stuff that I'm sure makes other people really happy. But for me, it either gets me very stressed or extremely bored. However, we're not there yet. So as I go through this way of building my business, I'm finding the people that I want to listen to. And there are some absolute charlatans out there. That's a great phrase, isn't it? Sounds like a Shakespearean insult. But there are some absolute charlatans out there. And there are some people who do know what they're doing. It's just a question of finding them, which I am getting better at. Anyway, one of the phrases that I'm hearing a lot at the moment is to make sure that your content addresses the problem of your client. So you aren't just telling them how wonderful your product is, you're showing them how you solve the problem. And apparently it's much more effective. And in some cases, I'm sure that it is. In others, it's just about creating a want. So I don't have a problem that needs solving when I'm purchasing some James Bond goodies. But show me a new snow globe relating to a 007 film and I am completely sold. It doesn't solve a problem, but it does look fabulous on my desk. As do all the others that I have on there too. Where am I going with this, you may well ask? First of all, this idea of, what's your problem, reminded me of something that people used to say to each other a lot in the 70s and 80s, along with, want a picture, when you noticed that someone was staring at you. Now, with the rise of the selfie, it would probably now be the case that someone would race over and offer to have a photo taken. But now we're thinking less in the aggressive way and more in the interested and curious way. Although, if I'm honest, I'm really not keen on the word curious. I think it's starting to be overused in the coaching community. So let's go with intrigued. We're interested in what's bothering people and how we can help them. I'm starting to hear a lot that sales is service. And this is incredibly true. So think about a place where you've had great customer service. You tell people about it. Maybe you become a repeat customer. And then on the flip side of that, what happens when you don't have great customer service? So in this regard, it seems fairly obvious. Work out what the problem is and speak to that, whilst you're building good relationships and all the other bits and pieces. Should be easy, right? Well, not really. From a psychodynamic perspective, a problem is rarely what it appears to be in the first instance. If we were all that straightforward, we'd know ourselves a lot better, I wouldn't have a business, the coaching and therapy industry wouldn't exist, and we'd all get a lot more done in our day-to-day lives. I'm sure you've heard of the hand-on-the-door syndrome that doctors experience, while I'm here, can I just mention, and then the patient talks about what's really brought them to the appointment in the first place. What's actually going on for us in these moments? Now, it won't surprise you to know that this is rich psychodynamic terrain. Often the presenting problem is just a cover story. Now, before we dive into this, to be measured and equal, this actually isn't always the case. There's a widely misquoted phrase that's attributed to Freud, which is something like him saying, sometimes a cigar is just a cigar. But he never actually said this, and I'm not sure he'd ever actually believed this, but it does actually speak to the idea that sometimes things are what they say on the tin. So if I've gone to the GP because I've got an infected insect bite, as has happened on many occasions, I'm clearly very attractive to a mosquito, there's no underlying tension to that. I have an obvious problem that needs a solution. But not every problem manifests itself in the same way. It's annoying when I get bitten and I can see the infection developing. I really don't want to have to wait in A&E for the prescription that I know that I need. but there's nothing that I'm avoiding there or wanting to be out of my conscious mind. So that's where the problems are binary. Sub-problems aren't quite so binary though. Sometimes our unconscious minds do not want us to consciously think about the problem that we have, and so we defend against it. Because if we can't see it or feel it, then it doesn't exist, right? Would that it were. Often we feel that there's a problem there and we can't even articulate it. So what happens is we direct it elsewhere. The actual problem can be all tangled up in our past experiences and past relationships. So, won't surprise you to know that there's some defence mechanisms that can come out to play in these moments. And let's have a think about what these are. So we've got displacement, incredibly common in these situations. I don't want to think about the thing that's really bothering me, so I'll fixate on something that seems a lot safer. For example, I don't want to think about the appraisal I've just had at work where my boss has said that I could be more creative in my thinking. It causes me to question myself and my abilities, which then can lead me into scary thoughts about whether I'm going to keep my job, get demoted or sacked, then I can't pay the mortgage and I end up on the streets with the kids and all their belongings in cardboard boxes. No. What actually happens is it's far safer for me to think about being cross with my partner for not putting a fresh bin liner in when they took the rubbish out. Because we don't have to think about then the really scary stuff. On a similar vein to this, we can also intellectualise. We can make the problem smaller by making sense of it, and then we can direct our attention elsewhere. We don't need to worry about it, because of course things should be happening that way. Or maybe we can play it in a way that they don't really need our attention, because it makes sense. It's a natural consequence for these things to be happening. Another way to look at it is the stated problem might actually be a very safe place for us to hide, so we don't have to think about the things that are really bothering us. If I think about struggling with social media, and let's face it, I'm not sure it's a happy place for a lot of people, either because of how to use it or the content that they see. I wouldn't say a lot of people are racing to be on social media, but in this case, it's actually easier for me to blame that than it is for me to think about how to make sales in my business. I'm British. I don't enjoy the whole sales part. However, I also want my business to work, and it's not just a hobby. But by blaming something else, social media and my relationship with us, I get to protect the status quo. I don't actually have to face the thing that's making me scared. I can hide in my little bunker of I don't like social media and that's what's causing me the problem. My invitation for you this week is for you to consider where in your life you've been hiding problems amongst other problems. What function do your problems serve for you? I know that feels like a bit of a challenging idea, but think about it this way. Sometimes our problems act as a defence and can protect us from things like shame, they can give us an identity, or they can actually provide some form of connection. When we have the same problems as other people, we can understand ourselves better and feel less alone. Sometimes in some ways we can feel that we're part of a community. So maybe our problems are giving us something, which is why we might not rush to solve them. Which it feels a little bit counterintuitive, doesn't it? That you're not racing off to solve a problem because it's actually giving you something. But there is a benefit to it. If you have a problem that you can't solve and there's a blockage for you, guess what? Chances are it's giving you something. And, as always, give yourself some grace. It can be a bit of a shock to realise that not all problems are actually problems. Sometimes they're disguises, distractions, or defences. And what will help us the most when we start to work with the problems, when we start to face them head on, is actually listening to what's happening underneath. Before we close, I want to share with you a couple of things that are coming up. So in early September, I'm doing a webinar with Scott Warren around our defence mechanisms that come into play when we're thinking about pricing. Always a tricky topic for us coaches. Absolutely recommend you coming along to that. There's also my course, Essential Psychodynamics for Coaches, and we're starting that again in September. Absolutely love the first round. Incredible group of coaches, lots of learning and discussion. The group that's building now, I'm so excited to be teaching and training. So if you don't want to miss out, come and join us and, send me a DM, send me an email, we can have a chat. I've also started doing some weekly LinkedIn live sessions. These happen on Monday afternoons at 2:30. So come and have some fun there, a little bit of psychodynamic fun for everyone, unless it's a bank holiday. And then, much as I love chatting about defence mechanisms, Freud, etc., it's time for a bit of me and James Bond. Looking at ourselves at this level can be challenging and unnerving as we develop our awareness, so I'd always encourage that you do this at your own speed. To have a chat about psychodynamics and find out more about the different ways that you can work with me, either as a trainer, coach, supervisor or mentor, then click on the link that's in the show notes. Thanks for listening to this episode of The Dynamics of Everyday Life. Don't forget to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. As well as producing this podcast, The Dynamics of Everyday Life has lots more psychodynamic fun going on, and you can find out more at dynamicsofeveryday.life.